A very good afternoon to you all. Today, we are going to talk about the Health Tech 2021, seeking opportunities beneath the uncertainty. If there are any lessons to be drawn from 2020, it's that making predictions for the year ahead. Despite that, some clear trends have emerged. The pandemic has made a lot of aspects of our lives different, including economics, politics, healthcare, and beyond. Amid the devastation, the healthcare industry has been able to be on the forefront. The IT sector has caused a lot of disruptions within all aspects, and we are going to hear from Dr. Niti Mathur, the director of United Health Group, on her personal views with regards to how the health tech sector has seen are seeking new opportunities in this era of uncertainty. So, welcome, Dr. Niti Mathur, and I would like to have a quick introduction from yourself.
Good evening to our audience, and thank you for having me here, George. So, I have done my MBBS and my specialization in obstetrics and gynecology from Delhi. Post which, I was in clinical practice for a while before I, kind of shifted and graduated into the corporate world. So, I have a total of around 22 years of experience in healthcare. Um, Out of which 10 were roughly in clinical and the rest have been in the corporate world. So that is the professional side. And other than that, I actually come from a whole family of doctors. So I'm actually the seventh in line. And one of the things that propelled me to move from the clinical world into the corporate world was the fact that, um, you know, we realized that there are only so many touch points that you can make as an individual. um, you can see maybe 1,000 patients in a year or so. But when you're working across healthcare systems, that's when the impact can actually happen. So I'm happy to be a part of the business of healthcare systems improvement.
Thank you, Dr. Niti. We will just move forward with our conversation. I would like to understand from you what do you think are the current disruptors in healthcare through automation and technology.
Mhm. So one of the changes that we can actually see right now in the that, and I think it is not only in the Indian geography but across all geographies, is that consumerism in healthcare is on the rise. There's been a strategic shift in the operations of the medical device industries, and the reason that consumerism is on the rise is because it is fueled by the advent of technology in healthcare, which is kind of it. Technology is something so far had been kept out of healthcare to a large extent, but now with the increasing advent of technology, two things have happened. One is One of the things that has happened is that the knowledge monopoly of the physicians is getting broken. And what do I mean by that? So historically, the relationship between a patient and a physician has has been inequitable, in the sense that the power dynamic has been largely in favor of the physician, with the patient having a very little say in the options, patient having very little visibility into what is happening, and for most part, the patient has been a very passive participant, although he has been the focus of the of the he is basically the center of where the healthcare need is arising from. So despite that, he was always kept he was always kept to be at a very passive engagement. Now with the advent of technology, you can just google something and you can know 10 options medical treatment, conservative treatment, surgical treatment. So patients just have to read it up and know that there are options available. And I think that is a major shift leading to consumerism. The minute the knowledge gets dispersed within the people, that is when the people become empowered. So there's going to be a shift towards consumerism, a shift from a physician centric model to a customer or a patient centric model is what we should be expecting to see in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Niti. It's a good topic that you brought about of the rise of classical uh, communism in the health space sector. This transformation in the consumer behavior is driving many healthcare and life science organizations to rethink their consumer relationship and the patient engagement strategies. Do you think it has led to a strategic shift in the operations of the medical device industries?
Yes, definitely. As I'm saying that the minute there is technology and the minute also with for example, uh, even in the medical device industry, the low cost monitoring devices with remote monitoring that will improve the consumer experience, especially with the monitoring of chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes, and heart diseases. I mean, that is that I feel is going to be one of the topmost things that are going to come up. Another way in which technology is going to really intervene is that there's going to be an advent of these aggregator platforms that serve as marketplaces for the hospitals, for the providers, for the insurance companies, pharmacies, labs, patients, uh, with the technology companies basically investing in these platforms, and these platforms are going to become enablers for facilitation of better healthcare.
Doctor, how do you think the privacy would be able to be maintained, especially when we really don't have the HIPAA laws in India? And also, till very recently, telemedicine was pretty much new, especially when you look at prescriptions being becoming legal only from March onwards. So, how do you think we are going to be looking at the privacy laws or the privacy of the patient, especially when technology is going to play a big way going forward? I mean, we know infectious diseases are going to be there.
Excellent question. Excellent question, George. um, and so that is a definite challenge that we have at the moment currently, unless we have very strong regulatory requirements that are laid down. You're right. Electronic transactions are going to there's going to be a challenge in getting them off, especially given the fact that there's a lot of personal information, patient sensitive information, uh, which the patients would not like to be leaked. So yes, there is unless and until so that's something that basically has to be moved. That's a piece that needs to be moved to the government, and hopefully our government, as and how digitization is occurring, will also look at healthcare and introduce these regulatory changes so as to ensure patient privacy.
Thank you, Doctor. Much has changed in the Indian healthcare industry in these past 10 years, and much change is yet to come, and that is the need of the hour. It's going to be constantly evolving. Please share your views regarding the affirmative changes that you wish to make or the experiences to make the Indian healthcare system even more promising.
Well, I agree. The Indian healthcare industry is also undergoing a transformation, and it is for the better, just as the rest of the world is at the moment. Now, regardless of the location of where the health services are rendered, there are only a few parameters that are actually used to evaluate the health services, and amongst them are cost, which currently in India is expensive; quality, which currently in India is variable; Accessibility, so we have uneven distribution between rural and urban centers, and consumer experience, which as yet is barely documented, or if at all it's documented, it's done in an extremely fragmented fashion, where some feedback may be taken from the consumer. What it means is that there is a huge opportunity that needs to be capitalized on. The ongoing pandemic has challenged the existing status quo in healthcare by providing an impetus, basically to telehealth, to telemedicine. And of course, it remains to be seen how well people embrace it, how comfortable they are with it. But my suspicion is that more than the people, it may be a change management exercise for the medical personnel. But when we look at the figures in the West, they are definitely encouraging, as and how people understand the ease and the cost advantage and the choices that technology brings in. I'm sure the trend will pick up. India has a huge IT presence, and a good IT infrastructure, and we're also very innovative. So I believe that we'll be making good strides um, in this area.
Thank you, doctor. A lot of foreign healthcare systems have come into India, and I mean, you must have seen a number of companies are now bringing the healthcare system in India. How is it different from the existing healthcare systems that are already there in India, existing there, compared to the ones that are in the UK or the US, for that matter, who are coming into India, where there is a lot of insurance kind of background? Usually, most of the people in the UK, or particularly in the US, let me say, are insured, and compared to India, where it would be just less than 20% of the people who are using the private healthcare sector are insured. So, how you think the shift you're going to be able to? I mean, what's going to bring about the the new systems? How are they different from the Indian systems, and how are they going to make a difference going forward?
That's a good question. And the reason that healthcare essentially at its most basic form is the same across the world. Now, whether it is in the US, or whether it's in the UK, or whether it's in Australia, uh, a patient has a disease, there is a doctor to look at the disease, and the process of diagnosing the disease and much of the treatment is much the same. So it's described in the textbooks, right? So what is different? Where are we different? One, we are different in the kind of technologies that we have. So different countries may, the more developed countries have better infrastructure with to support their populations, because of which the healthcare services may be better. That is one thing. The second the area where we are probably different is that are the rules, the regulatory bodies in the other countries are much more dominant, and much more, I think, effective in as compared to India currently. We have compared to specifically the US and even Australia, we are we it's definitely a development area for us. So the more the regulations, the more the standardizations, um, the better will be our overall uh, engagement with healthcare. uh, yeah. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
You're getting the spotlight right now, doctor, and saying that with the advent of telemedicine, has the patient come closer to the doctor, or hospitals made the doctor-patient relationship closer?
See, that's a very difficult question to answer. One of the things is, patients always, specifically in India, and I can understand, where they come from, that the in person, the touch of a doctor makes all the difference to the patient. However, practically speaking, it is not every patient that you need to touch. It may be more psychologically reassuring to the patient that yes, the doctor has seen me. But with the advent of with the advent of technology and last minute connectivity being thrown in, specifically during this pandemic and the kind of impetus we've had with telemedicine, I feel that, practically speaking, it is possible to treat patients even when they are remote. And that is a good, cheap way of offering good health care across geographies and providing the patient with alternatives. So right now, because one of the greatest disadvantages probably of the in-person thing is, the patient has to schedule a visit. He has to travel across from maybe a rural area to an urban area for what? For a 10-minute consultation with a doctor where the doctor looks at him, says, yeah, you're fine, and just continue your treatment. So specifically with regard to chronic diseases, I feel, or post surgical uh, follow ups, those are the kinds of situations where I feel that virtual connections will really work. And the more the people, once the good thing about this pandemic is it has, promoted and allowed people to shift online. So the more the ease of working online, so the more, they'll buy. We Today, even people in rural areas could buy stuff online. They could order something from Amazon. They could order something from, their clothes from somewhere, the food from somewhere. Small towns, B grade, C grade towns have accessibility. And so the more the ease with, mobile technology, the more the penetration of our networks, uh, this I feel is going to really, allow for growth in the virtual connect. Of course, traditional in-person medicine has always been practiced in India. So worst case scenario is the continuation of the status quo, but a best case scenario, and unfortunately it took us a pandemic to realize, to force us into the change. But I think that's happening all over the world. So I would say, it is about time that the doctor goes to the patient. We've had enough of the patient running to the doctors and it being, a doctor centric world, healthcare world. Now is the time when that change is going to happen, and it's the doctors who are going to reach out to the patients. George?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Just going to put you on another question, which is slightly. Yeah, I can.
Mhm.
Just another question, which is slightly uh, more relevant. Um, you have worked a lot with with a number of insurance companies and in the healthcare space, and you're a gynecologist yourself. Would you? I mean, what would you define? Does insurance drive up the healthcare cost or drive down the healthcare cost?
Does insurance drive up the healthcare cost or drive down the healthcare cost? Well, I suppose it is, the purpose or the objective of having insurance is to ease the process, and probably it's not centered around driving up or driving down. It's about how correctly is the execution happening. If you notice, the whole purpose of having insurance in place is to allow for risk mitigation and to that effect, it is effective. So, while it may increase the administrative complexity of the situation, so there's a payer, there's a provider, there's a member, there may be a pharmacy, and the four entities, and there may be regulatory bodies, so five entities, kind of interacting with each other through each other. So it increases the complexity of the administration, but overall, I believe that it will bring down the cost. Although that is really not the objective of insurance. The objective of insurance is to ensure that there is risk mitigation for the individual concerned. But that's how I kind of assess the situation to be.
Doctor, how do you think the IT technology, the technology is looking for opportunities to reduce cost, improve care, build awareness, and expand relationships? What are your thoughts on this?
IT is instrumental, absolutely, in today's world, because without IT infrastructure, in fact, without IT infrastructure, any industry, be it healthcare, banking, none of these industries are really going to make any strides unless we have very good IT support. And thankfully for us, India is on the forefront of it. Unfortunately for us, healthcare is one of those industries where the uptake and uptake of IT has been low, and there has been a fair amount of resistance from the particularly the providers who have a old kind of a they have so it's an old way of working. They're used to mm, paper documentation. They're used to writing out things instead of using computers and laptops. But I think that it's only a matter of time before that uh, kind of happens. So as and how the younger generations come in, this I would expect that they would be more computer savvy, and hence more technology savvy. And so I think the currently it's a challenging situation, and the challenge is not so much from the technology aspect as from the adoption aspect. So what I'm trying to say is that uh, I visualize that this adoption will slowly improve over a period of years, mm, with more tech savvy doctors coming in.
Excellent, Doctor. Uh, the one piece of advice that has stayed with you throughout your illustrious career and what keeps you going?
Oh my god. So fail fast, and failing is not the end. So you just pick yourself up and try again.
Yeah, I think so. That's a very important messaging, especially in the pandemic time, because a lot of people have gone through really tough times. I mean, unemployment has been quite rampant in all the space, and I think so. It's a very good advice to really that it's a phase, and everybody might pass through this phase. The people who can stand strong will be the ones who will come up again. And I think it's important to just reassure everybody it's just a phase, and hopefully it wears out towards the success of every person. A role model or idol whom you have always looked up to?
Well, I think that would be my parents. I think they were my first teachers, and so they have been the ones who have laid down the foundations of my principles. Um, and those principles are pretty universal. So they're integrity, compassion, inclusiveness. And they have held me in extremely good stead, whether while working in individual capacity as a clinician, or even, while I'm in corporate. So they're the kind of values that resonate everywhere in the world, and are essential to any individual who wants to make a change. So,
Another question, Dr. Niti, you have worked both in the corporate and the non-corporate sector at some point, and you have been through the era where uh, the healthcare was not so corporatized as it is now. Uh,
mhm.
what do you think? Do you think that to decrease cost in healthcare, it's also important to remove the number of layers of people that create a barrier, or also increase the distance between the physician and his patient?
It depends upon what you mean by a barrier. Because the way I see it today, we have some extremely qualified doctors, and our medical colleges also provide some very standardized, ways of teaching, and our doctors are as competent as anywhere over the world now, but they're also less in number. Given, when you look at the population and the number of doctors, our ratio is really pathetic. What that means is that each doctor needs to be surrounded by people who would support him in accessorizing in things that are important to the patient, but are probably accessory to the main encounter between the patient and the doctor. So I believe, on the contrary, that there needs to be a huge support system around every individual doctor, so that he can execute well. This needs to be a network of people who understand healthcare, who may not be, who are not physicians, but are basically healthcare personnel of other varieties. They could be nurses, they could be physiotherapists, they could be nutritionists, they could be um, you know technicians. There's a whole list of people who are required to help doctors, because you know the the patient has an expectation that the doctor would be able to should be able to look into each and every aspect of his management. Unfortunately for us, that's just not possible. To circumvent that issue is why we need this whole body of people surrounding the doctors. And yes, it can be a bit of a coordination issue always, and maybe it also impacts customer satisfaction, because to an extent they may have an expectation that a doctor would be looking into it, but that's not necessarily uh, true. It's not something that I would subscribe to. In fact, I would favor that a doctor be surrounded by a good support system that allows him to focus on the actual challenges that the patient is facing.
I do agree with you, Doctor. I think so. One of the things which we are really working on currently is to see that clinicians are more engaged with clinical work, and the non-clinical work is taken care by
Exactly.
information technology or systems and processes that would be more efficient. And hence I think so that would be something more ideal, so that we can use a doctor for more examining the patient, or the nurse for doing her more nursing type of job, uh, than a mandated administrative role. Doctor,
Correct.
what's the one piece of advice to the young and budding shareholders in the pharmaceutical industry or the healthcare in general?
I would say, be passionate about whatever you do. That's what is going to move you forward. The rest will just follow, unless and until you have that passion to do whatever. It's not just about healthcare. It's about, you could be doing banking, you could be doing, maybe designing clothes, you could be in a fashion industry, but you need to enjoy your work. You need to know that your work will make a change. Unless you have that drive, uh, you know it's going to be difficult.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for all your time and your valuable inputs. I hope our audience has really enjoyed this conversation. Please connect with us again on next Monday, and hopefully, we will be having another in beautiful discussion coming up for you. So, highly motivational Monday. Thank you, Doctor, for all your help and inputs. Have a great
Thank
day.
you, George, for having me.